Shalom Aleichem for Shabbat Naso. Mishnah Yomi is holding in chapter 3 of Gittin, Mishnah Bet, the second Mishnah here. We're on the subject of Lishma, that the get must be written for the specific individuals and only used by them. What about Hakotev Tofsei Gittin, scribes who are writing the Tofes? So we mentioned the Tofes. It's the standard form language that appears in every get. Now, they want to write some in advance, to have a couple on hand. If they get hit with a couple people need a get on the same day, they at least have part of these Gittin written already. Remember, there's the Tofes, the standard form language, and the Toref, the specifics. So now the Mishnah defines what those are. So Tzarich Sheyaniach, the sofer has to leave over blank Makom Aish, the place for the name of the man, Makom Isha, and for the wife's name, Makom Zman, a place for the date. And the Gemara adds also, I believe, the city that they're in, and also the words, Harei at muteret l'kol adam, that you are allowed to remarry anyone. I mean, anyone she's technically allowed to marry. The ex-wife being divorced could not then go marry a Kohen, obviously, but these magic words, at muteret l'kol adam, they appear in every get, but they're considered part of the Toref, the specific part, not part of the Tofes, the Gemara explains. Now, the Mishnah here compares this to other types of documents. Remember, we've seen back in the first parak, get usually means a get isha, but can also refer to other documents as well, financial documents. Shtari milva, what about loan documents? Tzorech shianiach, makom amolve, you have to leave a space for the name of the lender, makom alove, the borrower, makom amaut, the amount of money, makom azman, and the date. And again, the scribe is trying to get a head start. Maybe he heard that somebody wants to make a loan, but he's not sure it's going to be soon. So he wants to sort of get a head start. We'll have some forms available that people can then fill out quickly to get their loan done. Shtoi mikach, property sales, deeds, sarach sheniach makam alokeach. You have to know the purchaser, makam amocher, the seller, makam hamaut, the amount of money, makam asodeh, and a place to identify the parcel of land. Makam Azman, and the date, Mipnei Hatakana. And all of these allowances that we allow the Sofrim to write the standard language of transactional forms and Gittei Nashim in advance is a takana, to make life easy for the scribes and for the people who need the paperwork. Now, the takana here is that they can write the Tofes, the standard language, in advance, and then leave the space for the Toref and write that later. But Rabbi Yehuda poshel b'chulan. Rabbi Yehuda says you can't do that, not just for a get for an Isha, but in all of these documents, you can't write them in advance. Now, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that our sages said you can't write any part of a get in advance because it has to be lishma, and people can get confused, Toref, Tofes, which one's which, what's going on. So just if you let people write the Tofes in advance, they might write some of the Toref in advance, or might write those magic words, Rayat Muter L'Kol Adam, in advance, and that would not be a lishma get. And not only by a get isha, Rabbi Yehuda would extend that to all of these financial documents as well, because we'd have a gezerah. We're concerned that if you allow writing in advance by financial, loan documents and the like, you might write in advance by the Gittin and come to trouble. Now, another opinion, Rabbi Elazar machshir bekulan. Rabbi Elazar allows all of them. He allows writing in advance, and he would even allow, the Gemara says, writing the entire loan document in advance. If the sofer, the local town paperwork, the scribe guy, he hears that Reuven's going to borrow from Shimon, he could go ahead and write it up with Reuven and Shimon and just leave over the date and the place for the witnesses to sign. So according to Rabbi Elazar, everything can be written in advance, chutz megitei nashim, but not a get for a wife. Shenamar, as the Torah says in Devarim chapter 24, v'chotav loh, it's written for her, law, for her, lishma, specifically for her sake, as we explained in yesterday's Mishnah. Now on to Mishnah Gimel, Hamevi get, the messenger is bringing the get from overseas to Eretz Yisrael, v'avad hamenu, and he's misplaced the get. Do not try that at home. Mitzvah the altar, if he finds it la'alter, which means miyad, right away. Now the Gemara actually defines before, another caravan of travelers passes through that location. Kosher, this is kosher, it's the same get. No one else has had a chance to go by there and switch it or drop a different get or mess something up. V'imlov, if he doesn't find it right away, he finds it the next day, puzzle. That's going to be a problem. You have to go back to the husband and get a new one written up. Matzah, if he found the get, bechafisa, in his briefcase, or bedeluskama, his container, and it's got, it has his initials on it. It's his own luggage. He recognizes this briefcase. It's definitely his. So here he doesn't necessarily recognize the piece of paper or parchment that gets written on, but he knows the container is his. In Makiro, or if he recognizes the get itself, he recognizes this particular piece of paper. Once he puts eyes on it, kosher. This is still valid. Now the Gemara adds, even if it was missing for longer than the altar, but if he has what's called a siman muvhak, a specific sign on this document, the example they give is there's a hole in the parchment under a certain specific letter. That's a siman muvhak. It's definitely the get, and you can use that to validate that this is the same get that was lost. This is even done in modern times. Years ago, I was actually in the room when a Bezdin, a Jewish court, was looking at a get that came from another city, and it had an accompanying document, I think sealed separately, I don't remember exactly, that said there's a specific hole in a specific place under a specific letter, and the court looked at that to document that, to validate that this was indeed the correct get that was sent, and then they appointed 2 witnesses to be Edei Mesira and gave the get. Now the Mishnah moves to a new topic of chazaka, that things keep going the way they are. Hamevi get, there's a messenger bringing a get, v'cheinicho, and they leave the husband, zoken ochole. He's elderly, l'man Hashem, he could be 85 years old already, or he's a little bit ill, he could be in the hospital, God forbid. Note no law, they could still give the get, b'chezkot shu kayam, with the assumption that the husband is still alive. Unless he hears otherwise, he can assume that the husband who appointed him the agent and sent the get is still alive, and so the get is still valid. As we learned in Yevamos, they can't give a get after the husband has passed away. Now the Mishnah mentions a similar concept, Bot Yisrael Nesua Kohen, a daughter of a Jewish family, a regular Yisrael, who became Mrs. Kohen, V'holach Bala L'minat Yam, and her husband, Mr. Cohen, went overseas on a business trip, Ochelet B'truma. She can continue eating truma, which she's entitled to as long as her husband's alive, b'chezkot shu kayam, with the assumption that unless you hear otherwise, he is still alive and well. And one last chazaka case in the Mishnah, hasholech chatato minat yam. Someone from overseas sends in a chatas, a sin offering, to be offered in the temple. Now, chatat has to be offered when the sender, the person who needs it, is alive. Makrivin ota, we can bring it, meaning the kohanim at the temple who are receiving this chatat, or perhaps the money for a chatat, bechezkat shehu kayam, with the chazaka that the sender, the man or woman who sent in this offering, is still alive and still needs this chatat. Tizkul mitzvot, Shabbat Shalom.